Hello and welcome to the video. We'll be going over You Are The Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza, Making Your Mind Matter. Now, Dr. Joe is a very interesting person, and this book is going to be very interesting to you if you want to learn a little bit more about the subconscious mind, about how your personality really affects your personal reality, which is essentially your environment and the things and situations surrounding you. Very, very interesting. Now, before we get into the book, let me introduce Dr. Joe himself. And I just wanted to say that I watched some interviews with Dr. Joe before doing the mind map for this book, just to get a little bit of context for who the man is. And he has some very interesting interviews here on YouTube. I suggest that you go and check those out. He's also featured in the documentary What the Bleep Do We Know? And teaches workshops and lectures all over the world. This book actually has a lot of basis in his teaching and his workshops, because a lot of the stuff that he's talking about isn't necessarily studied in unison. So essentially what he's doing is he's taking some of the ideas that he's grabbing from these new fields that are emerging, and he's essentially testing them on the people that are in his lectures and workshops and bringing back some of the information to people like you and me in this book. He's the author of You Are The Placebo, obviously this book, but it's a national bestseller, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which is another best-selling book, and Evolve Your Brain. His books and teachings bring the latest discoveries from the realms of neuroscience and quantum physics into the realm of healing and reprogramming the brain. And that's where it's really very interesting, because he's taking real hard sciences, which aren't necessarily really connected to healing and reprogramming the brain and etc., but he's kind of applying those new sciences to reprogramming, healing, and the brain. And I think that this is very useful because a lot of people, specifically in Western cultures, have trouble kind of just taking the reprogramming and healing of the brain stuff seriously. But with this new kind of science-backed approach, Dr. Joe Dispenza is really bringing some of these great ideas that might have been around for millennia to some of the people in the Western culture. And I really think that he is achieving a lot by doing that. So let's talk a little bit about the book. The first quote that I pulled out to kind of explain about what the book is the incredible results I've seen in the advanced workshops that I offer, and all the scientific data that has come out of that has led me to the idea of the placebo. How people can take a sugar pill and get a saline injection, and then their belief in something outside themselves makes them get better. We'll talk a little bit about the placebo a little bit later in the introduction here. I began to ask myself, what if people begin to believe in themselves instead of something outside of themselves? What if they believe that they can change something inside of them and move themselves to the same state of being as someone who's taken the placebo? So again, the placebo effect is coming in here in the introduction. Isn't that what our workshop participants have been doing in order to get better? Do people really need a pill or an injection to change their state of being? Can we teach people to accomplish the same thing by teaching them how the placebo really works? So those are some of the questions that he was asking himself before he came up with the idea for this book, I assume. And that's really what this book is all about, empowering you to realize that you have all the biological and neurological machinery to do exactly that. My goal is to demystify these concepts within the new science of the way things really are. So demystifying these concepts, that's exactly what I was talking about before. He's trying to take these concepts that might have been around for quite some time of reprogramming the brain and healing yourself, but he's trying to put them in the realm of science, something hard that people can look at and really cement themselves to. It's just another way of presenting the ideas, essentially. So he continues on and he says, demystify the concepts within this new science of the way things really are, so that it's within the reach of more people to change their internal states in order to create positive changes in their health and their external world. So that's really his mission. If that sounds too good to be true, too amazing to be true, then as I've said, towards the end of the book, you'll see some of the research compiled from our workshops to show you exactly how that's possible. So you can see he's doing research at his workshops. Now we'll talk a little bit more about the placebo. So the placebo is a proven and scientific fact. Almost everyone's heard of it before. But essentially, when you give someone a sugar pill, they believe that it will help them heal their ails, it sometimes actually works. So much so that they actually have to do placebo-controlled tests when they're testing any sort of new drug or some sort of new treatment. It's a very interesting fact, but what does it mean for me and you? Because obviously we're not testing drugs or any treatments, at least not right now. Well, Dr. Joe says, as Cousin said of placebos back in 1979, the process works not because of any magic in the tablet, but because the human body is its own best apothecary. So apothecary is essentially the drugs, the place that you would get the drugs, essentially. And because the most successful prescriptions are filled by the body itself. The most successful prescriptions are filled by the body itself. So the body has this amazing capacity to be able to heal itself. There really is some amazing statistics on the placebo inside of the book, and we'll get a little bit more into the placebo a little bit later. Bring this into the tangible realm for you guys right now. I really like this book because of all the tangible evidence, right? Again, there's a lot of stuff inside of his workshops and etc. at the end of the book. Quite often when books talk about the brain and the subconscious mind, you kind of have to take it as gospel. And that's what I was talking about before, where in Western society, we're not quite so versed in some of these techniques of healing and reprogramming the brain and etc. So we do have to take it as gospel when we read these things. But Dr. Joe has given workshops for quite some time now and shares quite a few pieces of extraordinary evidence in the book. I recommend that you pick up the book if you're looking for some more of the tangible evidence. I couldn't get into it very deeply, not as deeply as I would like to in the mind map, but it's definitely worth a read either way. So go ahead and pick up the book. And with that, we'll move into our first idea here, our first main point, which is personal reality. This is something that I actually had never heard before, but the quote goes like this. If this is your personality, then your personality creates your personal reality. It's that simple. I like how he's doing a little bit of wordplay here. Let me get into a little bit more about what he means. And your personality is made up of how you think, how you act, and how you feel. So your personality is how you think, how you act, and how you feel. That's pretty easy to follow. So the present personality who is reading this page has created the present reality called your life. So you can see, okay, how you think, how you act, and how you feel is essentially what brought you here. It's essentially what created the conditions around you. So your personality has created your personal reality, or the reality that's surrounding your life, or you right now have created your life. It's a very interesting concept and an interesting play on words that, again, I had never heard before. Okay, moving on. And that also means that if you want to create a new personal reality, a new life, then you have to begin to examine or think about the thoughts that you've been thinking and change them. So we talk about also in the book how the thoughts that you're thinking are leading to how you act and how you feel. So the thoughts are really leading to your actions and how you feel, which is creating this personal reality, or the reality of your life. And essentially, if you wanted to change your life, then first you need to change your thoughts. And how many books that we've done together, as far as mind maps go, have said this exact same concept. Very important to change your thoughts before you can actually take the actions and change your reality. So Joe continues on, he says, you must become conscious of the unconscious behaviors that you've been choosing to demonstrate that have led to the same experiences. So you're constantly living out probably these same few experiences in your day-to-day life, continually. So you need to be aware, you need to become conscious of those unconscious behaviors. And then you must make new choices, take new actions, and create new experiences. And that's essentially how we're going to go through this transformation process. And that right there is essentially the really core concept here in this You Are The Placebo book. So let's talk a little bit about personality. It's really made up of how you think, leading to how you act and how you feel. So how you think comes first, and then you act and feel based on those thinkings or on those thoughts. Personality creates your personal reality through those actions. So thinking leads to acting, which leads to feeling, right? Or feeling, which leads to acting, is essentially the way that it works. So it's obvious that if you want to change your reality or your external experience of reality, you need to change your personality. And now it gets a little bit confusing because personal reality and personality seem so similar, but essentially personality is who you are, and your personality really has led you to your personal reality, or where you are right now. So continuing on with another quote, he says here in the book, when you learn new things and begin to think in new ways, you're making your brain fire in different sequences, patterns, and combinations. That is, you're having an activating many diverse networks of your neurons in different ways, and this is coming into some neuroscience here. And whenever you make your brain work differently, you're changing your mind. As you begin to think outside the box, new thoughts should lead to new choices, new behaviors, new experiences, and new emotions. Now your identity is also changing. So this is sounding a little bit similar here to James Clear, where he's saying, Joe's kind of talking about how you can change it from the identity level, so to speak. You can change how you're thinking or what your thoughts are, and that'll help you change your behaviors and experiences and new emotions. But then your identity is going to change, because once you start making these new choices, new behaviors, new experiences, like James Clear talks about, it starts to become this feedback loop where the new experiences and new behaviors are actually telling you who you are, and your identity is listening. And that's how they become easier and easier and easier over time, is because they're becoming part of your new identity. So another point here in the book is he talks about you need to become conscious of the unconscious behaviors. So how do you become conscious of the unconscious? You ask yourself questions, essentially. How aware are you of your thoughts? When you're thinking things, are you aware of them? Are you present, and are you able to look at what your thoughts are, what thoughts you're thinking? How aware of you are of your emotions? How aware of you from your actions, right? Very interesting questions to ask yourself. Becoming aware of these things is the first few steps in the change process. I really believe that awareness is the first step. You have to be aware of a problem before you can do anything to try and fix it. First, you have to be aware of what you're doing and why, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But first, we're going to talk about the unknown. This is a nice heading. I like this heading. So the quote that I pulled this one from actually is, crossing the river of change requires that you leave the same familiar, unpredictable self. Connect to the same thoughts, same choices, same behaviors, and same feelings, and step into a void of the unknown, connected to the same thoughts. So essentially what he's saying here is, if you're going to make any change, if you're going to make any real change in your life, something for the better, you're going to try and heal yourself, you're going to change your unconscious patterns, so to speak, change your personal reality maybe, then you're going to need to leave the same familiar, predictable self, which is comfortable. It's connected to the same thoughts, same choices, same behaviors, and same feelings that you're living out day to day. I saw in one of his interviews, he said that everyone's living about 90% of their day the exact same every day, over and over and over. And it feels uncomfortable. If you're going to get very far away from that 90%, it starts to get pretty uncomfortable. So that's the gap between your old self and the new self, the new person that you want to be, is the biological death of your old personality. I like that, biological death of your old personality. If the old self must die, then you have to create a new self with new thoughts, new choices, new behaviors, and new emotions. Entering this river is stepping towards a new, unpredictable, and unfamiliar self. The unknown is the only place where you can create. You cannot create anything new from the known. So if you're living your day-to-day life 90% the same, and you can really only affect that 10%, and really that 10% probably isn't even being affected by you, it's probably being affected by external circumstances. But how much can you really create? How much can you really change if you're only able to influence 10% of your day? I would say obviously not very much. So what's one of the main reasons why we don't change more than 10% at a time? Quite simply, it's fear of the unknown. It's that the unknown is very uncomfortable. If you're to change 50% of your day, that's a big change to some of the choices, the behaviors, and some feelings, and it's uncomfortable for your body and for your mind to do that. When we're trying to create a new identity, we're moving into the unknown, and that makes it very scary for us to create a new identity, to become a new person. It doesn't feel normal because it isn't normal. We aren't being ourselves. So Joe uses the analogy of crossing the river in his quote here. And that is what we'll need to do. We're going to cross this river when we're attempting to create a new personality. Remember that your personality leads to your personal reality. So even if you don't say, you might say, I like my personality. But if you're here and you have some things that you might want to change about your life, you're going to need to change your personality in certain areas of your life, because that is what leads to your personal reality. Your thoughts are leading to your personal reality. Again, same thing. Creating a new personality is the first step to that change, because if you don't create a new personality, you're never going to be able to stick to some of the things that you need to stick to in order to adapt and change that new personal reality. So some people call this experience the dark night of the soul. It's the phoenix igniting itself and burning to ashes. The old self has to die for a new one to be reborn. Of course, that's going to feel uncomfortable. That's one of the quotes from the book. Most people feel the discomfort of change and immediately they go back to their old ways. Absolutely. How many times do you have someone in your life that's saying that they want to change something? They want to start eating healthy. They want to start exercising. And they keep saying that, but as soon as they start to get a little bit on the path, they immediately go back to their old ways because it's uncomfortable. And they're completely uncomfortable being a little bit uncomfortable, right? A little bit of discomfort and they quit on what they've said that they wanted to accomplish. Maybe that's you or maybe that's someone that you know. But if we don't get comfortable crossing the river, how can we make any real change? So it's not even necessarily that we need to get comfortable at the specific change that we're making, but we need to get comfortable crossing the river, because this crossing the river action is going to be continually present in our lives if we're going to look to be successful in almost any area. Very interesting analogy of the phoenix, because it really is kind of like a death. It's the death of your old thoughts. It's the death of your old actions. It's the death of your old emotions. And if you're like me and you've been through any sort of real change, a real change in your identity, the people around you actually will start to notice. And some of them will feel uncomfortable for you. And you have to be comfortable enough to be able to deal with that yourself. It's very interesting. Making a big change is not only hard on you, but it can be hard on the people around you because of the unknown. So the next interesting point that he talks about in the book is epigenetics. And I've heard epigenetics before. This is in the health field, and essentially these epigenetic topics that I was researching before were all around how exercise and fitness kind of change your epigenetics and lead you more towards a healthy life. But the way that Joe explains epigenetics in the book is very interesting to me, because I'd never heard it put like this before, but it just makes so much sense. So the word epigenetics literally means above the genes. It refers to the control of the genes not from within the DNA itself, but from messages coming from outside the cell. In other words, from your environment. If that sounds a little confusing, he'll go into it a little bit more here. Epigenetics teaches that we indeed are not doomed by our genes, and that a change in human consciousness can produce physical changes, both in structure and function in the human body. So this is the part that I had never heard before, but I'm so interested in. A change in your thoughts, a change in your human consciousness can produce real physical changes in your body, in your structure, and your function. Like I was thinking, okay, if I eat more salad, if I eat healthier food, or if I exercise more often, then I'll be able to make a change in my genes that will lead me towards being a more healthy person in my old age. But what Joe's talking about here is just that change in human consciousness will actually change that physical, will create this physical change in the body. And that's just so fascinating. We can modify our genetic destiny by turning on the genes we want and turning off the ones that we don't want, through working with the various factors in the environment that program our genes. Some of these signals come from within the body, such as the feelings and thoughts. So that's what he's talking about, feelings and thoughts, while others come from the body's response to the external environment, such as pollution or sunlight or exercise and eating healthy, like I was talking about before. But the one that I'm most fascinated with, and the one that we'll talk about the most, is this one that is going to happen from our feelings and thoughts. Very interesting. Epigenetics suggests that even though our DNA code never changes, thousands of combinations, sequences, and pattern variation in a single gene are possible, just as thousands of combinations, sequences, and patterns of neural networks are possible within the brain. So we'll talk about changing your genes here, but I want to talk a little bit about epigenetics, just in case it's not something in your wheelhouse at this moment in time. So epigenetics is essentially the ability for our DNA to change as a response to the environment, internal or external, as we talked about already. So think about two twins. Do they look the same at 50 as they do at 5, or even at 5 days, we could say? They look almost identical at 5 days. Now, the twins have the exact same DNA. Their double helix structure is essentially exactly the same. But because of the environment, they eat different food, they hang out at different places, they exercise in different ways, they end up looking quite different by the age of 50. And if you know any older twins, you'll know how different they really can look. It's quite fascinating. Now, that's the power of epigenetics. And as I said before reading this book, I didn't realize that our thoughts emotions, and actions are all a part of that environment. I thought it was the exercise and the eating healthy. Literally thinking that you can change, thinking a thought can change your genetic code. That genetic code is responsible for everything that is you, or essentially your personality. So change in an instant. The example of twins show us that what might happen over decades and decades of different choices, right? With those epigenetics, you can see externally how much those twins changed over those 50 years because of the external choices that they made. They made big changes. But what if you could change in an instant? And this is something that Joe talks about not only in the book, but in some of his talks as well. Joe talks about one of his workshops where they taught them to meditate just for 4 days. It was all sorts of different types of meditation. Then the people went home and meditated for 5 out of 7 of the days of the week, which really isn't that much. A month later, they came back and they measured their telomere length. So telomere length is essentially your true biological age. They can tell exactly how old you are biologically, health-wise, by measuring your telomere length. So some of these people had actually increased their telomere length up to 10%. And if you know anything about telomeres, that is not easy to do, especially because they weren't taking any other actions other than just doing meditation, other than just controlling their thoughts. So this is some really groundbreaking research I think that Joe's doing right here, at least as far as I'm concerned, is very groundbreaking. It's not exactly an instant, like I said in the title, but this is maybe just a hook to try and grab you. But for a 10% increase in lifespan, meditating 5 out of the 7 days of the week sure isn't a big investment. And that's only after a month. Think about what would happen if it was after 2 months, after a year, after 5 years. How much more life would you get just by doing 5 out of 7 days a week of meditation? It's very interesting. Something to think about. With that, we'll move on to our next big idea, which is rehearsal. So the quote that I pulled from the book that led to this point is that this is possible through mental rehearsal. So this is essentially just a technique. He says this technique is basically closing your eyes and repeatedly imagining performing an action and mentally reviewing the future you want, all the while reminding yourself of who you no longer want to be, the old self, and who you do want to be. This is very interesting. This is some visualization. So we talked a little bit about meditation. We talked about how it affects epigenetics. And now we're going into visualization, something that I'm very big on. This process involves thinking about your future actions, mentally planning your choices, and focusing your mind on the new experience. By keeping your focus on this event and not letting any other thoughts distract you, in a matter of moments, you turn down the volume on the neural circuits conditioned to the old self, which begins to turn off the old genes, and you fire and wire new neural circuits, which initiates the right signals to activate new genes in new ways. So this is the type of thing that I'm talking about here with this change in an instant. You do this simple technique and it immediately is starting to rewire your new neural circuits. Okay, so it's not going to make a massive change the first time you do it, but after a few times, after 5 times, after 10 times, after 30 times of doing this type of a technique, eventually, slowly but surely, you are going to become more of those new wired neural circuits than you are of the old wired neural circuits. So thanks to the neuroplasticity discussed previously, the circuits in your brain begin to reorganize themselves to reflect what you're mentally rehearsing. So any action or any thoughts, etc., that you want to create in your mind, you can use this technique to reorganize the brain and rewire those circuits so it makes it easier for you to do it. And as you keep coupling your new thoughts and new mental images with strong positive emotion, then your mind and body are working together, and you're now in a new state of being. At this point, your brain and body are no longer a record of the past. They are a map of the future. I'm going to say that again. So most of the time, like I said, people are thinking thoughts of the past, and 90% of their day, they're just living the same thoughts and they're living the same actions because of those thoughts. And at this point, when you've gotten into this mental rehearsal technique, your brain and body are no longer a record of the past, but you've set yourself up to be a map of the future. The things that you want to accomplish, you've already accomplished in your mind's eye. A future that you've created in your mind. Your thoughts have become your experience, and you just became the placebo. Very interesting. So we'll talk about rehearsal. We'll talk about practice in this next point. One of the ways to get more comfortable when crossing the river is mental rehearsal of practice. This level of practice can help you in changes you're looking to make, any changes you're looking to make. So ask yourself, how would I react in this certain situation? Say, for example, you're going to try and eat healthier or exercise more often. What would that look like? Can you rehearse yourself doing that continually over and over and over again? And will that make it easier to go ahead and do it in the future? What emotions will I feel? What thoughts am I going to be thinking? And this is what I call in my self-coaching course, the vision. So the very first thing that we do in this self-coaching course is we look at what is your compelling future going to be. And we really try and visualize it. We go through and we do visualization exercises to help you kind of cement this and become that map of the future through what Dr. Joe calls mental rehearsal. Now, I didn't read this book before I made the self-coaching course, but it essentially is the same thing. After that, we connect the vision to the thoughts, the actions, and the emotions that you're going to need to have and be comfortable with in order to make that vision a reality. So I'll leave a link down to my self-coaching course down below. I recommend you pick that up as well. It's a very interesting model that Dr. Joe puts forward, and the self-coaching course really just helps you create a dashboard for a lot of the things that we're talking about here to make them much, much more easily actionable. Now, our next point is going to be about gratitude. And I love gratitude, but Dr. Joe's take, once again, on gratitude is much different than what I have heard before. And that's what I love about some of his interviews and his books and etc. On the other hand, emotions like gratitude and appreciation open your heart and lift the energy in your body to a new place, out of the lower hormonal centers. So what does that mean? Emotions like gratitude, they bring you up. What does that mean? He says that gratitude is one of the most powerful emotions for increasing your level of suggestibility. We're going to talk about suggestibility a little bit here as well. It teaches your body emotionally that the event you're grateful for has already happened. Isn't that so interesting? Now, normally when we're grateful, I think I'll talk about this a little bit later, but normally when we're grateful, what's happening is we're grateful for the things that we have, for the people that we're with, or we're grateful for the events that have taken place. So our body is kind of set up for this gratitude thing to happen only after something good has happened for us. So we can kind of trick the mind by coming in and saying, I'm so grateful that this thing that I want to happen in the future has already happened. And your mind will start to act and wire itself as if that thing has already happened, leading you to being more comfortable and creating your own personal reality around that. So we'll continue on. It teaches your body emotionally that the event you're grateful for has already happened, because we usually give thanks after the desirable event has occurred, exactly what I just said. If you bring up the emotion of gratitude before the actual event, your body, as the unconscious mind, that's a point that I didn't really include in the mind map, but if you go into the book, he talks about how the body is the unconscious mind. Very interesting. Will begin to believe that the future event has indeed already happened or is happening to you in the present moment. Gratitude, therefore, is the ultimate state of receivership. So before you can really receive anything, you want to be grateful for that thing. It's very interesting. So gratefulness for the future. What are we going to talk about here? A lot of books and research back up how important gratitude is. And of course, everyone has been talking about gratitude recently, I think. But most of them talk about gratefulness for the past or the present, exactly. The things we have, the things we've experienced, the people we're with, just like Dr. Joe says here at the end. He says, because we usually give thanks after a desirable event has occurred. But I love Joe's concept of using grateful, that conditioned response to gratefulness during your self-talk. So essentially self-talk is something that is a concept from Dr. Shad Helmstetter in his book, How to Talk to Yourself. What to say when you talk to yourself, to make it feel like things have already happened. So we've talked a lot about this. I'll leave a link down to the video if you haven't seen it yet, but it's a great book. So what's more powerful? Two different affirmations or two different thoughts. So we've been taught to think, okay, I am healthy and fit. And even that is maybe necessarily further ahead than you are right now. A lot of people might even be at this point. I wish I was healthy and fit. And then the I am healthy and fit maybe is kind of the next iteration of it, right? That I am statement to try and cement it more into the present moment. But what about this? I am so happy and grateful for my amazing healthy body and my level of fitness. So I bring that gratitude into the present moment, even though I haven't necessarily accomplished my goal as far as my amazing healthy body is concerned yet. Very interesting. See how this really will pull you and make you feel like it's okay for that to happen to you. It's bringing you into that state of receivership like Dr. Joe talks about. So I've been trying this, specifically this gratitude thing out since reading the book, in a certain different type of meditation. So I've been really diving into meditation. I've been doing at least an hour of meditation every single day, if not 2 or 3 hours of meditation every single day. And I've been trying to use this to get out of my logical mind during my meditation, because what I've been finding is that I'll start to ruminate on something, or I'll try and solve a problem, or I'll be thinking about one of the books or one of the mind maps or how to grow my YouTube channel or a million different things, 1.5 million different things, because that's what your logical mind wants to do. It wants to ruminate on things and thoughts and problems and continually try to solve these problems, because it's really thinking that it's looking out for you. It's trying to protect you. It's very interesting. It's great, but it's only great in certain situations. When I'm really actually focusing on trying to build my business, this is a perfect mind to have. The logical mind is very important, but it's otherwise extremely mentally taxing, and you get very tired if you're consistently in this logical mind mode. And what ends up happening is, if you're in this logical mind mode all the time, what you'll do is you'll zone out. You'll watch crappy TV. You'll watch YouTube videos that aren't this mind map. You'll numb yourself with different numbing agents like alcohol or food or drugs or whatever it is, because you're so mentally taxed, that because you haven't shut that logical mind off, and it's so mentally taxing. So most people, me included, are in our logical brains 24/7. So just by using this one technique, I was able to get out of it just for a few minutes during my meditation. So like I said, an hour, 2 hours of meditation, I might get 15 minutes, 20 minutes of being out of my logical mind during that meditation. And I instantly feel a rush of energy. It's lasting and it's real energy. It'll pull me all the way until the very end of the day. It's so interesting, where if I let myself shut down that logical mind, how much energy immediately flows from within me. It's beautiful. So next we're going to talk about the how-to. What am I doing? So when you notice your brain, this is during meditation, when you notice your brain trying to solve a problem, practice gratitude towards it, that logical brain, right? I often say, thanks, logical brain, or thanks, buddy. I actually call my logical brain buddy. I'm getting into the realm of crazy here. Just stay with me for a second. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate you trying to help me out. But you got to let it know, right? You have to let it know that you've decided to use your higher brain at this moment. That's the affirmation. That's the I'm grateful for my amazing healthy body that we talked about before. So I'll say, but I've decided to connect with my higher brain right now. And then I try and reassure myself, because I'm trying to cross the river here. So I'm trying to make it so that I feel comfortable, more comfortable in this amount of discomfort, which I really am getting uncomfortable trying to do this. So I say, everything will be fine. I know you're important, and I'll use you again soon. But right now, we just need to rest. And man, this has helped me get out of my logical brain more than any other meditation technique that I've ever tried. I know it sounds crazy, and I realize that, but just go ahead and give it a try. Talk to that logical brain while you're meditating and say, I'm grateful for you. Thanks so much. You've helped me with so many things and accomplishing so much in my life, but I've decided to connect with my higher brain right now. Everything will be fine. I know you're important, and I'll use you again soon, but right now I just need to rest. It's very beautiful. So with that gratitude exercise underway, if you want to turn off the video and go directly into that gratitude exercise, have at it. We'll see you in a little bit. But if not, we're going to move on to the subconscious mind, a topic that a lot of you probably are watching this video for. So the quote from the book goes like this: if meditation is about entering the autonomic system so that we can become more suggestible and overcome the challenges just mentioned, then we need to know how to get there. So that really is what meditation is all about. Entering that autonomic system so that we can become more suggestible and overcome the challenges mentioned. And he's actually going to talk about some different ways to get out of the logical brain, or the logical brain wave that I just talked about here as well. He says, The short answer is that we get there on a brainwave. The brain state we happen to be in at any given time has a huge effect on how suggestible we are in the moment. So this is, again, neuroscience that he's bringing. That brain states is what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about getting rid of my logical brain, is actually getting in to the theta or a low alpha brain state. And we'll talk about that here. Let's talk about brain states. If we want to access our subconscious mind and do some serious reprogramming and changing to our personality, we need to get into a deeper brain state. And again, this grounding in science is, to me, very interesting. So we have to go from beta, which is essentially the state that I'm in right now. I'm reading, I'm articulating, I'm thinking, and that's the logical mind state. Again, it's very good for certain things. It's important to be in that logical mind when you're at work, potentially, and in a lot of different scenarios. It is important to be in. But like I said, we're all in it for 100% of the time, 24/7, and it's not good to constantly be in the same brain state all the time. So we want to go from beta, and when we're in meditation, we want to go to alpha, and then we want to really try and get deep into a theta state, which is obviously very tough to do. Takes many hours and hours and hours of practicing meditation. But like I said, that little exercise that I showed you before was really the breakthrough for me to get into this theta state. Now, I'm not measuring it, but it just feels like a different state from beta to theta, I'll tell you that. So this is accomplished mostly through meditation. Again, many different types of meditation will work at the different workshops. I'm sure Dr. Joe's teaching a lot of different types of meditation because not one thing is going to work for everyone. I suggest that you try the one that I outlined above just to give it a quick try. If you have tried meditation before, it might be a great way for you to break through and get into a deeper brain state. The biggest barrier for changing our personality is being bombarded with stimuli from our own mind. So during this beta state, our minds are going to be looking for and solving problems, even imaginary ones. And quite often, again, 90% of the time, you're solving the same problems over and over again. But during an alpha state, we get much calmer and we're more open to suggestion and more open to change. And then during theta, we can make such massive changes in just a short period of time. And that's what I was experiencing. I believe that's what I was experiencing when I was telling you about the massive inflow of energy that I got because I got into that theta state. And once I got into that theta state, my brain had just this deep relaxation. I could easily come back out and change some of my patterns and my habits on the other side so quickly and easily. It was really quite a beautiful state to be in, and I look forward to continually getting back into that state daily if possible, because it was such a helpful state for even just the rest of my day. You know, this probably isn't the way that you should motivate yourself, but when I got into that theta state, I was able to use my logical brain much more fiercely and ferociously when I got back out of that theta state, right? The theta state in and of itself is likely very rewarding. I likely just haven't gotten to that deep of a level with meditation yet, but I'm really looking forward to getting to that level. Now, our final point here that we'll get onto with this video is greatness. And this is really just a beautiful quote. It's not really, it's just the way that I wanted to wrap up the book, I should say. It doesn't have too much to do with a lot of the things that we were talking about before, but I thought it was a beautiful quote. So, there are no schools of ancient spiritual wisdom sitting high on mountaintops in the Himalayas, waiting to initiate us in becoming mystics and saints. I really believe this, and I also believe that this same quote can be put towards apps, so meditation apps, to gurus, yoga teachers, and etc. These people can help. They can guide. They can show you the way, but they can't do the work for you. And that's, I think, what Joe's trying to get at here. Our lives are our initiation into greatness. Maybe you and I should see life as an opportunity to reach great and greater levels of self so that we can overcome our own limitations with more expanded levels of consciousness. And he's essentially talking about how he motivates himself, or how he thinks we should motivate ourselves in order to continually make these changes and continually do these meditations to get into these types of states. That's how a pragmatist instead of a victim sees it. So you're looking for, how can I make real and lasting change in my life? This might be a great way to go ahead and do it, instead of it's impossible to make a change, right? Two different ways to think about it. To abandon the familiar ways in which we've grown accustomed to thinking about our life in order to embrace new paradigms will feel unnatural at the beginning. Frankly, it takes effort and it's uncomfortable. Why? Because when we change, we no longer feel like ourselves. My definition of genius then is to be uncomfortable, to be okay with being uncomfortable. That's a great explanation of genius, because it really is. If you're going to accomplish anything great, which essentially is genius, it's going to at least take genius to accomplish anything great. You're going to need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And again, I couldn't have said it better myself. No schools or apps are going to teach you this way of being. They might teach you, but they're not going to give you this way of being. But instead, we can use our lives as the path for the journey towards greatness. This won't be an easy journey, but it will be worth it. And I thought that was a great quote to end on. And with that, that's the end of our mind map. That was Dr. Joe Dispenza with You Are The Placebo. Hopefully we'll see you again in the next mind map. Thanks for being with me.